There's the tweet. All right. And there we go. I just tweeted it out if you want to send it out as well.
Yep. Done.
Cool. Thank you, sir. All right, Ben. It has been a crazy day for a roller coaster of emotions. I basically, I had shades of the Chris Bosh moment, from years ago. Shades of DeAndre Jordan reneging on the Mavs deal. But the Rockets have secured Christian Wood. The reports showing 3 years, $41 million deal. I am so ecstatic about this move for the Houston Rockets. Give me your immediate reaction.
Yeah, it's a really strong deal in a market where Mason Plumlee is getting $25 million over 3 years to get Christian Wood for $41 over 3. Sounds like the Rockets will be using the trade exception potentially from the Ariza deal, also with the Pistons to bring him in. However they do it, look, that's a really good value for a 25-year-old big man that, he averaged 22 and 10 once Andre Drummond went out following the February trade deadline. That's a pretty phenomenal deal to bring in in today's NBA for less than $14 million a season. You feel pretty good. And the reality is that this is basically 3 different deals. This started on Monday with the Covington deal to Portland for...
I thought you were going to go even further back than that, but...
well, you could. Okay, so you could go...
It's 4 different deals, right?
You could go all the way back to the Capella deal, yeah. But in terms of this iteration of the Rockets, and yeah, someone in the comments brings up Marcus Morris, 64 for 4. Wow. Compare Christian Wood at 41 for 3 to Marcus Morris getting 64 for 4. Yeah. Malik Beasley, we saw that deal. Christian Wood at 41 for 3 is a really great value. But to get back to the point, look, you've had these 3 transactions this week. Covington for the 2 first, then you had Ariza and one of those first for a future first in a coming season from Detroit. And now you're effectively, whether you fold Christian Wood into the Ariza deal or if it's a separate deal involving that trade player exception, the bottom line is effectively you have Christian Wood and 2 future first round picks for Robert Covington. And it's hard not to be excited about that. Covington's he's a heck of a player, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, Christian Wood, number one, he's younger, he's 25 as compared to Covington's going to be 30 next season, so he's younger, he has more upside. And secondly, even if you give Robert Covington the benefit of the doubt, which let's be real, he's a really, really good player, I don't want to be insulting to him, at the same time, you have Wood plus 2 future first-round picks that you could conceivably use down the line to either further bolster your team or if James Harden still wants out to conceivably rebuild this roster if that's what it comes down to. So either way, given the straits that the Rockets are in right now, would I prefer Christian Wood and the 2 first-round picks or Robert Covington? I would prefer Christian Wood, and that's not an insult to Covington at all. It's just given the Rockets situation, I think it's a pretty good end of the week.
It's not an insult to Covington at all. He's phenomenal. He did have his shortcomings, specifically with, I think the misconception about Covington is that he is an elite 3-and-D wing. Unfortunately, he's not. He's an elite, weak side help defender. He's got great defensive instincts, but there were periods, especially during the playoffs, both against the Thunder and the Lakers, where he was put on an island by players from both of those ball clubs, and they were able to target him defensively by putting him on an island and attacking him incessantly, and that kind of showed the weakness in his game. Now, maybe you can make the argument that, if the Rockets were running a more traditional style defense, running a legitimate big, not switching everything that comes their way, then maybe Robert Covington gets to excel in his role as that, dominant weak side defender, which is what it's going to look like he's going to do in Portland. As long as everything, all these moving parts, which again, nothing is finalized yet. That's the one thing that we have to emphasize is that we are operating off reports. Now, do these reports usually become true? They absolutely do. But there are times where sometimes these deals do get reneged on. But just immediate, and you talk about Christian Wood averaging 22 and 10, after Drummond went down, those are his per 36 numbers. So, 22 points, 10 and a half boards a game for per 36 numbers. He is going to slot in next to James Harden, and just thinking about what James was able to accomplish with Clint Capella, and then having a big with a far deeper bag than Clint Capella could have ever imagined. I'm sorry. Can we just
So
I know I have to put everybody through this for a moment. Can we just think about the like handful of times that Clint Capella actually took jumpers in game?
yeah.
Love Clint, but they just, I mean, the slowest hitch, just, you know, and then watching highlight videos of Christian Wood and what he's going to be able to accomplish. Wood is going to be the most talented front court player James Harden's ever played with
So
in Houston.
besides his athleticism and what he can do as a role man, here's the interesting thing. So at first glance, you would say, okay, it's a small sample, his 3-point shooting, his first few years, he was very much hit or miss. I read some stories that he really kind of cleaned up his mechanics before last season. But the 3-point numbers actually got better the more he played. For the season as a whole last year, he shot 38% about from 3-point range.
39% almost, if you want to
He
be generous and round up a
he
little bit.
actually shot 41% if you look at the 15 games after Drummond got traded,
Okay.
which is when his minutes per game shot up to about 35. So as the sample size increased, his 3-point shooting actually got better. So while, again, 15 games, it's still a small sample, at the same time, it's not like all of a sudden, well, he was just playing a few minutes here or there, and now that he's going to be a starter playing that type of minutes, it's going to go back down. Actually, no, last year when he became a starter, the 3-point shooting got even better somehow. So there's some reasons to believe that it's legitimate. And if you combine that type of role man with James Harden, those type of athletic gifts, he's still just 25 years old, still getting better, and then a 3-point shooter. I mean, just imagine what, the synergies we saw between Harden and Capella, and now you have a 3-point shooter with range that can actually shoot. Yeah, that's going to be really, really fascinating, assuming the Rockets hang on to James Harden.
You know, and we kind of open, you know, briefly talking about the roller coaster of emotions that have come out of this day so far, and we're not even done. You know, there's so much, there's more moves to be made. There's more things that are bound to happen. But just, you know, walk me through, because I was spiraling for a moment there, as were many of you that are watching right now, hanging out. You know, Houston fandom is sometimes a tough pill to swallow, but it looked like that Christian Wood might not actually, the report came out that the negotiations were not super close, and then they come back, they circle back. Just walk us through that immediate dip and then back up into securing what is a great prospect. That's kind of, again, this is, I think you mentioned it already, but the fact that, you know, maybe if James Harden decides he wants to stay, this is a great elite pairing for him. But then maybe if Harden still wants out, if that's still, you know, if that's still something that they have to deal with further down the line, you know, dealing James Harden to another team, be it Brooklyn, be it Philadelphia, possibly, whoever it may be, Christian Wood's only 25 years old, and he's got nowhere to go but up.
I'm not going to lie. It was pretty scary seeing, so Frank Isola broke it, but Adrian Wojnarowski and Zach Lowe both tweeted about it, and then they deleted their tweets.
Tweets from those accounts are the scariest things ever.
And then I started thinking back, and Isola was one of the two New York Daily News writers that had the Carmelo at the 2-yard line report from June 2017. And that, of course, was the year the Rockets did not get Carmelo Anthony, despite the trade talks going on for basically 3 months. So, you know, it's a situation in which whoever it was that leaked that, they probably weren't going to be wrong. But at the same time, in modern NBA free agency, things can change on a dime. We've seen it this week. Obviously, the Dwight Howard situation tonight, going from the Lakers to the Sixers. We saw it with everything that went down with the Bucks and Bogdan earlier this week, and now he's apparently going somewhere else. Things can change very quickly. So it's one of those situations. It seemed pretty clear that the Rockets had a plan in regards to, look, if you're trading Robert Covington, who's a really, really good player, I think we agree that even with his limitations in the switching defense, you're right that one-on-one in the perimeter, he's really
there's an argument to be made. He was the second best player during stints for that Rockets playoff run.
And to get back to your earlier point, I think he'll be a better fit in Portland than Houston, actually, when you're not switching as much. Just make him as more of just a modern NBA 4. I think that's where Covington will be at his best, and he's even more useful as a rim protector, as we saw in Houston. That's where, you know, he can really shine even more than people give him credit for. But if you're going to trade Covington like that, open up the larger mid-level exception, which immediately the Rockets, Raphael Stone, whoever in the front office, leaked to Woj as soon as that deal went finalized or leaked, whatever you want to call it. It's not finalized, but on Wednesday night, then it seemed pretty clear that this is about winning now. This is not about a rebuild, because, you know, the number 20, the 16 pick in this year's draft, honestly, that's a pretty solid pick. It's a draft that had pretty good depth. So they traded for a future pick because it's more kind of, there's better liquidity.
It's a flexible
Yeah, there's
currency.
more liquidity on the trade market, and you're opening up the larger MLE. That's, and of course the trade exception too. And it sounds like they're actually going to get you're going to get Christian Wood through the trade exception. Look, all of that is about opening up opportunities to win now. And so it seemed like they had a plan. We didn't know that it was Christian Wood, although once the Pistons started signing every other free agent center that there was, it started to seem like, okay, here's some dots that you can sort of connect. And
doing their best impersonation of the Knicks last summer. Just, I swear, trying to monopolize the market on mid-tier bigs across the NBA, I guess.
Yeah. Now, but, I just feel like it felt all week like there was something bigger at play, and I'm just happy that there was, because it's been a really tough couple of weeks for the Rockets and especially the fans, and so I just feel a lot of relief that things have worked out the way they have.
Yeah, I mean, we got to face facts. Is there have been a lot of moves made by this organization that have not looked good on the surface, and I think that's a very fair claim to make. Moves that have been made to directly dodge the luxury tax, with criticisms, and rightfully so at times, trying to cut the margins by using replacement players rather than, re-signing the players that got you to the places of success this team has seen in the past. But now we have a firm confirmation that, look, this team, they made a big move by bringing in Christian Wood and by going above and beyond what was the originally reported 3 years, $27 million, going 3 years, $41 million, with that starting salary probably hovering around that $12.8 million range. I keep checking my phone too. Just every notification that pops up, I'm like, is this another one? What's happening? Continuing on here, though, I do want to talk about, because we got the Shams tweet talking about Russell Westbrook for John Wall, and that that the talks have since stalled, but the idea that John Wall does want out of Washington, is kind of crazy, because you've got two all NBA caliber guards who are not happy where they're at. Yeah. Where are you weighing a John Wall Russell Westbrook trade? Because I think I'm kind of in on it.
Yeah, I'm interested too. I wouldn't do it straight up, obviously, but depending on the compensation that you get, look, there is a relationship between James Harden and John Wall. John Wall actually came down to Houston for one of James Harden's first charity weekends a few years ago, actually played in the offseason charity basketball game. So there is a relationship there. He's not a great three-point shooter, but I believe he's shot 30% or better from three for the last 6 seasons. So it's better than Ross, not a total liability. And here's the thing. You could be buying low. A lot of the reason that typical Achilles tear guys, especially in year one, aren't that great. Typically, the Achilles is an 18-month injury. You have these guys trying to come back in 9 to 12 months to make it back for the next season. That's really rough. However, because of the weird circumstances of this past season and the delay to this coming one, it's basically going to be 2 years almost from when John Wall tore the Achilles to when he starts playing again in this coming season. That's a lot of time to recover. And if he's fine, he has about 2 years less of mileage on his body. He's 30. Russell just turned 32. And Russell actually got to the NBA in 2008, Wall in 2010. So there's a lot less mileage. Also, it's not obviously been as deep in the playoffs as Russell has. So if the Achilles is right and he's had 2 years almost to heal it, there's a lot less mileage. He's a little bit of a better three-point shooter. Now, with that said, is there a risk? Yeah, absolutely. Russell's been an MVP. John Wall, while very good, is not at that level. I understand everything that goes on with the medical side of this, and the Rockets should be compensated in terms of either future first-round picks or, I've heard Thomas Bryant mentioned. You've got all sorts of possibilities of that you could throw together. But let me throw you a scenario, Jackson. Here's what I see as the ideal. So if you could, and now it sounds like Wall,
I'm bracing myself for this.
It sounds like Wall wants out, so that puts even more leverage on the Wizards to maybe get a deal done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get this deal done, and you have John Wall, James Harden, Christian Wood as sort of your quasi big three going into the season, if you can get, like, let's say, I don't know, a couple of good assets from the Wizards, be it a couple of first-round picks, maybe it's a pick and a young prospect, whatever it may be, and then you pull them with the assets that you've got this week, going from Robert Covington to Christian Wood, basically Covington for Wood and a couple of firsts. Now, it sounds like maybe the first converts to 2 seconds because the Pistons are getting some additional, I'm reading right now, protections on that future first as a part of the sign and trade. So we'll have to wait and see. But the bottom line is the Rockets have gotten assets for going from Covington to Wood, and they might have more upside. And then what if you get assets for going from Westbrook to Wall? Well, there's a scenario where if things start going well, Westbrook or not Westbrook, Wall, Harden, and Christian Wood, that if you have a good start to the year, and then you have all of these future assets, you could make a trade at the deadline, this year's deadline, for whatever star is disgruntled, maybe Bradley Beal, I don't know, whoever comes on the market, sort of like the scenario I'm going to throw out there, Jackson. You remember 2007 when Kobe Bryant demanded a trade from the Lakers, and so many things were going wrong, and the Lakers didn't bite at the time. They rolled into the season. Next thing you know, Pau Gasol comes available. They touch things up. They get to the finals. They didn't win it that year. They did win the next 2 titles. You might be able to salvage a relationship with James Harden as well. I don't think Christian Wood in and of itself is going to have James Harden going back to the office tomorrow saying, everything's great now, we're ready to roll. No, I don't think it's that simple. But what I am saying is that if the moves you make this offseason also position you to maybe at the deadline, who knows, maybe next summer, whatever it is, to then make another big move down the line, then maybe it can be. So that's sort of where I'm looking. I'm not saying that Christian Wood and John Wall, you're immediately going to just have James Harden locked in, say, you know what, forget about the Brooklyn thing. I'm good. I'm not going there. I think that's a stretch. But I do think if you get assets and basically going from Covington to Wood, let's call that a swap, even though it's not Covington for Wood, it may as well be in terms of their fit in the rotation, also where they fit in terms of the salary structure. You did that and you got these picks. And if you do the same thing with Westbrook and Wall, then you're all of a sudden in a much better asset place to make a big deal in the future than you were before all of this. So I don't know. That, to me, I do see some optimism in John Wall, but more than that, I'm just sort of bullish on the idea of buying low on Wall, because you know what? If Wall doesn't work out, well, let's go to the other side of this, Jackson. Let's say that Wall is, I don't know, washed is extreme, but let's say he just doesn't bounce back the way we're hoping. Maybe you can't change James Harden's mind.
2 years off is too much. Yeah.
You know what? His contract is the exact same as Russ. We're pretty much in the exact same spot, and nobody seems to think right now that Russell Westbrook has positive trade value anyway. So the absolute worst case is that you're in the exact same spot, but with the Wall instead of Westbrook, and conceivably you have these future assets. So I don't really see that much downside, because I don't really see Russell Westbrook, especially if you hold on to him until next year, getting almost to 33, having that much more value. But the flip side, if it does work out, then you could win more games in the interim, and you'd have this additional upside with the picks to get better. So I just really don't see that much downside to it, especially if Russell Westbrook doesn't have much of a trade market. But I could see a lot of upside if you get, a couple of future assets, and then you can conceivably use them down the line.
And I think the thing that has to be mentioned too is nothing is a guarantee in the NBA, right? And I hate to use this as an example, but I think everybody was putting the what is it, the expression, the cart ahead of the horse with the Warriors, expecting them to be top 4 seed, Steph coming back, Clay coming back, Dre, getting the band back together. And unfortunately, Clay tears his Achilles. So the Warriors are a gigantic question mark now about whether or not they're actually going to be even in the playoff hunt with just Steph Curry and Kelly Oubre and Draymond and, whatever else they've got going on, Wiseman, I guess. But legitimately, the Nets are not a guaranteed thing without James Harden. And if the Nets come out next season and fall flat and struggle in the play, or struggle possibly in the regular season, maybe an injury happens, maybe they fall flat in the playoffs, maybe it's a disappointing first or second round exit. Does James Harden really feel like he wants to go to another organization and say, you know what, I'm the guy that can push them from a disappointing first and second round exit with KD and Kyrie already in company? And there's, they've got a pretty solid cast of role players as it stands. Does he really think I can be the guy that's going to push them over the top and make them Eastern Conference Finals bound or Finals bound? And then on top of that, are they championship favorites at that point? Because from the rumors that we've heard, KD might want James Harden in Brooklyn, but it doesn't sound like Kyrie is super on board with that idea.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I go back to too, Jackson, like people make these situations so dramatic because we have social media now, because we have Twitter, and there's this nonstop cycle. In the grand scheme of the NBA, this is not that unusual. Hakeem Olajuwon, before he won a title with the Rockets, demanded a trade. They found a way to make it work. Kobe Bryant, as we just mentioned, about 13 years ago now, he wanted out. They made it work. So this is really not that unprecedented. Everyone makes it seem like, once a guy wants out, because everything on social media is so damn dramatic that, well, you just got to do it. It's over. everything else? No. I mean, there are ways that these situations can change. They can evolve over time. The narrative's already starting to shift a little bit. You've got a young big man in Christian Wood that could be really good. Let's say you get off to a good start to the year and you have these future assets that you could use in eventual trades down the line. Look, I mean, I think I don't want to be too hopeful because the odds are still against them. Like, all of this is reasonable. When we're talking about these scenarios, it's still less likely than likely. Look, James Harden wants out for a reason. He's close with Kevin Durant. The odds are still against the Rockets. All I'm saying is that there's a path. There's not the despair that it's felt like really the last week, in which it felt like the inevitable death. There's a path now. Is it likely to work out? I don't know. There's still a lot of variables that have to line up. But truth be told, that path, given the way things have felt for the Houston Rockets fan community for the last really week or so, I would say, maybe even more than that, about 10 days, I think you'll take the path.
All right, Ben, I really appreciate you stopping by for this. We got kind of the Rockets angle on things, and I want to talk with Matt from over at Locked On Pistons here next, kind of get some of the Detroit angle on stuff. Ben, as always, thanks for stopping by.
Yep, thanks for having me, bud.
What's up, Matt?
Oh, you got Duncan here.
Oh, I got Duncan. Even better. There we go. What's up, Duncan? So we're gonna get two Pistons angles. That's what I want. I want angles. I want angles from everybody.
All right. 1 second here. I'll get my
All right. No worries. We're good. This is a very informal pod. We got behind the scenes. We got people setting up mics. We're all good. There we go. That's Perfect. What I want. Hang on. Give me 2 seconds. We got to clean this up. And here we go. Now we've got Matt in here as well. What's up, Matt?
What's going on, guys? How's it going? Is it
How's
Duncan?
it going? Yeah, that's Duncan.
Hey,
what's up, buddy? How you doing?
How you doing, man? Good.
Good to see your face.
Yes. Good to see yours as well. Been a
All
while.
right, guys. So, so I've got two of the best minds when it comes to the Detroit Pistons right now.
Where are they? When are they showing up?
So, guys, walk me through what's going through each of your minds. I want you to start, Duncan, then we'll get Matt's opinion. So, first off, walk me through what the Pistons are doing with their current signings and how this works with Christian Wood. And then also just, I want to talk about the potential of, the sign and trade, whether or not they're looking at maybe including Blake Griffin. Is there an option for a Russell Westbrook deal there? We're going to get to all of this. So just hit me with your initial thoughts, Duncan. You first.
Okay. I think as some of your listeners might know, I have been kind of a mixed proponent of a Blake for Russ swap. And when it looked like the Pistons were acquiring just ridiculous amounts of random salary that made no sense whatsoever, I was starting to think maybe we're going to have something manifest that I had really only kind of suggested as a joke almost. But then Hollinger kind of rained on that parade, and it turns out that everything is going to be satisfied by stretching Dwayne Dedmon and Rodney Magruder.
Yeah.
But it appears as though like the main gist of all of this work was to get Jeremy Grant, and then the Rockets angle with the Ariza trade yesterday, getting when was the draft? Wednesday?
It's hard to say. I think it was about 1987.
It's just been a blur. This entire week.
Chaotic. Yeah.
Cramming NBA offseason into the span of a week was never a good idea. My heart can't take it. I've had so many ups and downs this week. Just today, just hearing about, Christian Wood, 3 years, $27 million, and then 3 minutes later, Shams is like, no, pump the brakes, kiddo. We're not quite done here. That was just a nightmare. Matt, kind of hit me with some of your thoughts right now, man.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's been fun to follow everything that's happened over the past 3 days. So that's kind of like the rush, the adrenaline. Duncan and I know that following this team for the last 10 years, since the good days of the Detroit Pistons, has been really kind of boring and depressing and just all these bad feelings. So to have some excitement's been pretty cool. So it's been fun to talk about some new stuff, to talk about some new players. But unfortunately, the problem that I sense, because I sense that Pistons fans were ready and were kind of excited for the tanking, right? The rebuild, the bottoming out, and that the draft, getting those 3 first-round picks, the one from Houston, as well, that people were ready for it, and people were patient, going to be patient, and try to get one of the best players in a draft 2 years from now is right down the road. Ypsilanti, Amani Bates, and then you got Cade Cunningham next year.
Yeah, it's going to be loaded.
Chet Holmgren, possibly next a year or two as well. So there are players that people are excited about. You got Jalen Green there, so there are guys that people are starting to think about. And then I tell you, it's nice. It's beautiful down here in downtown Detroit tonight, weather-wise. We got a little Indian summer going. And I, after some of these, the center after center after center the Pistons were picking up, I went outside and I went for a little walk, and I was like, wait, Houston needs centers. This Christian Wood, 3 years, $27 million. The original reporting came over, and then it was pulled back. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be some sort of sign and trade. They're still trying to figure something out. Just putting the dots together, and then the Mason Plumlee deal for the Pistons makes no sense for a team that's rebuilding. So that doesn't make any sense. So I'm putting the dots together, and I'm like, wait, the Westbrook trade has happened. The Pistons are trading for Russell Westbrook. This is like almost in the bag. It's going to take a little while because this is very confusing. The Pistons got to figure out a way to maximize all their assets, but they're definitely going for it. Troy Weaver with the ties of Oklahoma City with Westbrook, Arn Tellem being involved as the agent of Russell Westbrook before. It just makes too much sense. You could throw in like a Sekou or a Svi Mikhailuk to kind of spice it up if it's Blake, or if you figure out a way to get Dedmon in the deal with Derrick Rose, and maybe you can keep just piling on contracts to make it work. Maybe there's a way to keep Blake and Westbrook together. But
there's plenty of money there to be had. I mean, Westbrook's got a big deal, so you do have to match it up somehow, and that's why I feel like most fingers are pointing at Blake. They're just like, that makes the most sense, right? But
it's the only way it makes sense now at this point. But again, I went from like, I'm walking around downtown Detroit, like I'm 90% sure the Pistons are trading for Westbrook, but then they make the Grant deal, and it seems like now that you stretch out Dedmon, you stretch out Magruder is what we're hearing now. So it sounds like that's not going to happen, just to be clear about my opinion on it. But there was a while where I definitely thought it was happening. But I think Pistons fans, unfortunately, it's more of let's go try to win the 7 seed and see if Blake Griffin and Jeremy Grant and Derrick Rose and Svi Mikhailuk and these rookies and Sekou Doumbouya in year 2, threading that needle between contending and rebuilding at the same time, which is what they've been doing for 10 years now, and it hasn't worked. So I'm sensing that maybe we're headed back to a little bit of purgatory. That's not a great place to be.
Well, good, because the Rockets want that pick. So if you guys could scrape into the 7th seed, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Duncan, kind of where are you at on this idea for, I know that kind of the way the optics look right now, a Westbrook for Blake Griffin trade doesn't sort of look like it's in the tea leaves anymore, but where are you at on that front?
Could you repeat the question?
We lost him. Oh, the pain. All right, there we go. It's okay. Internet happens like that sometimes. So
if you're a Houston fan and you're excited about possibly this trade happening, and again, I still think it's possible that some sort of Blake for Russ swap could be out there. It makes a little bit sense for the Pistons just because there's not like a natural, like there's not a whole lot of dominant ball handler. I mean, assuming that Derrick Rose maybe gets moved in a trade too, that there's not a lot of dominant ball handlers on this team. So there's backcourt minutes and backcourt, shots and all that kind of stuff available. Now, Jeremy Grant came over supposedly because of a larger role in the offense that he's going to get here in Detroit, as opposed to what he would have gotten in Denver. So that wouldn't jive with Russ Westbrook coming over here. But I guess we'll see how things kind of shake down.
You've also got here's the thing too, playing devil's advocate or whatever, just throwing in the caveat. There's Killian Hayes too, diet James Harden. So he's a guy who's going to need the ball in his hand.
Diet.
Well, no. Well, I don't know if we're going to go. I don't know how far we're going to go on diet. This is a bit of a joke. We did a pod recently, and we were talking about what versions of diet James Harden are out there. So we've got Luka, who's generic James Harden, because Harden's the real deal. He's the name brand, stuff. So Luka is generic James Harden. Then we've got we dubbed Killian Hayes diet James Harden, and then we dubbed Luke Kennard. Who came up with it? It was starvation James Harden. There we go. That's what Luke Kennard was.
Bulimic James Harden. Yeah.
Bulimic James Harden. Sure. All right. So Duncan, we're happy to have you back in here. So I just wanted to get kind of your thoughts on this potential, even though maybe the tea leaves aren't reading this way, anymore after the continued news that's been coming out, but the idea of a Russ for Blake Griffin swap and kind of where that would lead.
Well, I think that it does actually make some sense. Maybe less so now that the Pistons have drafted Killian Hayes. But say pre-draft before the Pistons got Killian, they were in need of a guy who could shoulder a heavy load offensively, who could play a lot of minutes, handle the ball a lot, and he could fit, especially like if the Pistons could put some shooters around him, with Luke Kennard now gone, and even Tony Snell, who doesn't really do much, but the one thing he did do was shoot pretty effectively. With guys like that gone, and now Killian here, it makes a whole lot less sense for the Pistons than it did, say, 72 hours ago, 96 hours ago. I kind of like Blake with the Rockets, though, because he is so
he's a dynamic front court player.
Yeah, and he's now he's a prolific 3-point shooter as well. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time like he would have before. So he could play. He can play off the ball with Harden. He can knock down a bunch of open threes. And when Harden needs a break, when he needs when he needs a breather, he can carry the load offensively, handling the ball and stuff. But I think that that's actually kind of a perfect role now for Blake, where he's at in his career. So it doesn't make as much sense now as it did a week ago, but that's kind of where I'm at there. I think that they're now more for the Rockets than for the Pistons. There were some real fit opportunities there.
Now, and this is going to be the sore spot for you guys, and I'm really sorry that you guys lost out on the services.
Yeah, we're dead inside.
You know why you don't have any sore spots left? You're like, I've been staring into the abyss for years. No, you guys have centers to cover up all your sore spots. No, anyways, sure. So with Christian Wood, kind of give Rockets listeners, your quick elevator pitch on what he's gonna be like on this team and what they can look forward to. Matt, go ahead and go first.
Yeah, just a dynamic talent, 25 years old now, and bounced around the league. I mean, there was some
started with the Rockets.
Yeah, he's showing up late for practice kind of stuff was the word, but character issues, whatever you want to say, where he bounced around and never really got opportunities. The Milwaukee Bucks, the New Orleans Pelicans. He had a small stretch of games with the Pelicans at the end of one of those seasons where he had huge numbers, and then had some big G League numbers with Milwaukee and New Orleans as well. So the Pistons brought him in last summer, gave him a chance to make the team in training camp. There was the famous Joe Johnson versus Christian Wood battle for the final roster spot, and Joe Johnson just looked completely washed after the big three, and rightfully so. The Pistons made the right decision, brought Christian Wood in, and Dwayne Casey, who's kind of known as one of as Pistons fans have their issues with him, but he's certainly one of those parental type figures. He can take these guys, and he's a fantastic role model, great guy, fantastic mentor, especially for some of these young guys. And he really kind of put Christian Wood under his wing with a lot of tough love, and in very limited minutes in the first, I want to say about 60% of the shortened season, really performed really well in short spurts. So much so that Pistons fans wanted him to get back into it and play more minutes and get into a starting role, especially with how frustrated they were with Andre Drummond at that point. So putting up knocking down 3-pointers. The most impressive thing about him is when he does these quick drives and finishes with hard dunks. He has highlight reel dunks almost
from what I've seen.
Basis.
His ball handling ability is actually surprisingly good for a big. He's
super
got
skilled.
A really crisp handle.
Super skilled guy. Questions defensively as far as does he know quite where to be? Does he know quite what to do? Has blocked some shots, but certainly not a defensive stopper or impact player on that end. But just a guy who's got a lot of capabilities and a lot of potential there. So he'll put up numbers. And once Andre Drummond was traded, he was inserted in the starting lineup and put up huge numbers for the worst team in the league, the Pistons, in that last 15 games or so. I think they lost 11 of 12 after trading Drummond, or maybe even more than that. And but at that time, Christian Wood was the best player on that team for the Pistons in that stretch of losses, and made himself a lot of money, just like Jeremy Grant did in the bubble. How much money did Jeremy Grant make in the
60
bubble
million.
from
Oh,
I'm not knowing
well,
made, but like
sorry.
how much
I
was
was
he
like,
going to
wait.
make before the bubble? It went from like 35 million to 60 million or something like that.
Yeah,
just from
definitely.
a strong playoff performance. And so that's Christian Wood. I don't know, Duncan, if you have something to add or refute to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's all very accurate as far as I'm concerned. I think that Christian is going to be excellent beside, assuming Harden doesn't get traded. I think he's going to be a really, really good offensive complement to Harden. The pick and roll game, the driving kick game that Harden can really unlock for Christian Wood, I think is going to be huge. At times Christian was like the only player with any kind of offensive game whatsoever, especially in that last 13 game stretch or so, when Drummond was traded and Reggie Jackson got bought out, and even like Markieff Morris got bought out, and there was just like no NBA players left on that team. Derrick Rose was hurt, Luke Kennard was hurt, Blake was out of the lineup. Christian really shouldered the load that final stretch, and he's not going to have to shoulder the load, obviously, in Houston, assuming there isn't like a fire sale and Christian is like the best player on the team again, like he was in Detroit. I think that Harden plus Christian Wood is going to be a really dynamic duo on the offensive end, and he's going to probably struggle a bit on defense because that's kind of the book on him. But I think his offense really outweighs his flaws defensively.
38% from three last year, so knocked it down from long range and should fit in well. I know that things have changed down in Houston since the style they had, and we'll see how that team looks going forward with everything new in a lot of ways. But certainly one of the more underrated, but then he became overrated in terms of the free agent class at some point. But $13-14 million per year sounds about right for a guy with his potential.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I think it's so interesting. You're looking at it from the angle of, he's probably going to be, barring a potential Russell Westbrook for Blake Griffin swap, the most talented front court player. And I say talented, just, maybe that's a slight to 2013, 2014 Dwight Howard, but just from a skills perspective, his bag is extremely deep in what he can do offensively. So that complements James Harden like no other, and expecting a lot more of a dynamic offense this season under Steven Silas. A lot more dribble handoff, a lot more off ball motion, and he's a guy that can kind of unlock that for the offense. You saw Silas and what he did with Doncic and Porzingis in Dallas, and now you've got James Harden, the Doncic on steroids, the OG Luka Doncic, and then you've got now Christian Wood, who is maybe not at where Kristaps Porzingis is, but is also an equally talented front court player in his own right, and what he's able to do. And having those two guys and seeing what he's going to be able to unlock for them offensively is going to be amazing. Also, shout out, yes, PJ can put away the stilts. He no longer has to play the 5 spot, which is incredible. He gets to slide back to his more natural role at the 4. Guys, Matt, Duncan, I really appreciate you guys jumping on to talk about this with me. So really quick, Matt, where can everybody check you out at?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Matt_Shook, and that's SCHOCH, another underscore after that. The Locked on Pistons Twitter account. I write about sports gambling, so if you're interested about sports gambling, follow me there. And I'll give you all the updates, especially if you happen to be in Michigan watching this, about when launch is coming for online gambling. And so thanks for having me.
All right, Duncan, where can we check you?
You guys can follow me on. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Duncan Smith NBA. And these days, all my writing content is on Hoops Habit, where I'm the site expert. And as we speak right now. Not right now, but before this and shortly thereafter, I'm taking care of my live free agent tracking for Hoops Habit. So that's been really fun, especially when those two Pistons centers came in back to back, and I just about burned everything around me down. If you want to see me lose my mind in text form, go read that free agent tracker. It's easy to find if you go follow me on Twitter at Duncan Smith NBA.
And keep posting bottles of the Crown Royal there, Duncan.
Oh yeah, honestly, it's been all caffeine. I haven't touched it yet, but it's coming.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll be ready for it. So, yeah. There we go. There we go. I'm the one who's late to the party, apparently. Guys, again, really appreciate y'all joining me here. And of course, if you want continued Rockets coverage, you can follow me on Twitter at JT Gatlin. Of course, the show at Locked On Rockets. But for our emergency podcast where the Rockets have acquired Christian Wood, that's going to do it. So thank you all so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston